I'm Naomi Fletcher. And the moment I knew I was going to die wasn't dramatic. No thunderclap. No confession. Just a sentence wrapped in false care. Try to rest. You'll feel better when we get there. He said it as he tightened the blanket around me, kissed my forehead, and closed the SUV door behind him. But Daniel's voice no longer warmed me. It slid across my skin like cold breath. I watched him walk around to the driver's side, pop the trunk, and grab the duffel bag, the one he'd packed without asking me. It was the only bag. He said the cabin was close. But that was 20 minutes ago. I tried to keep my eyes open, tried to mark the time, but the morphine clouded everything. It dulled the fire in my lymph nodes, yes, but it also dulled the shape of thoughts. I drifted in and out, pulled under by fatigue that felt more like a tide than a drug. Still, even in that haze, I knew something was wrong. 3 years ago, I was alive in every sense of the word. I built something from nothing, my firm, my life, my name. I didn't have time to fall apart. And Daniel, he was part of the narrative. The loving husband, the partner who believed in me, until cancer rewrote everything. The first year of treatment was a war zone. He held my hand during chemo, brought me bone broth and cold towels, whispered words like, "You're my warrior." I clung to that, but warriors become heavy burdens, especially when they stop bringing in money, when they stop being beautiful. I noticed it in the way he looked through me, in how he started working late, how his shirt smelled like citrus and musk. Not mine. I didn't ask questions. I couldn't afford to know. Not then. When Daniel suggested leaving the city, trying an alternative healing retreat with a forest herbalist he'd read about, I said yes. Because the truth was, I was out of options. The hospital had already given me months at best. I figured, what did I have to lose? I never thought he'd be the one to take the rest. The road narrowed into a rutted dirt trail, tall pines pressing in on both sides like guards. I wanted to sit up, to ask how much farther. But I couldn't lift my head. All I managed was a hoarse whisper. "Where are we?" Daniel didn't answer. His knuckles gripped the wheel tighter. His eyes stayed forward. That's when it clicked. He wasn't bringing me to something. He was taking me away. We pulled into a clearing. The SUV stopped with a low grunt. The cabin stood crooked. Just one room, sagging roof, boarded windows, no smoke from the chimney. Not a healer's home, a place people leave things to die. "Is this it?" I asked, barely audible. Daniel smiled. That same smile again. "It's isolated. Peaceful. You'll feel better here." My stomach churned, not from the illness, from certainty. He helped me inside, laid me on a cot that creaked under my weight. I tried to scan the room. No power, no running water, no food at a rusty wood stove. Empty shelves, dust on everything. This wasn't a sanctuary, it was a tomb. Still, I thanked him. Because when you're that close to the end, you hold on to anything that feels human. Even lies. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened. To wind scraping branches. To the sound of Daniel breathing steadily beside me on a mattress across the room. I thought about the healer. Would they come in the morning? Would I even be here? I don't remember slipping into sleep, but I remember waking. The cold hit first, sharp as needles. The cabin door was open. A sliver-wide wind crept in. I turned my head slowly. Daniel's mattress was empty. His shoes, gone. My duffel bag, gone. My meds, gone. No food, no flashlight, just gone. I forced myself upright, every joint screaming. Crawled toward the door inch by inch. Outside, tire tracks, mud. Nothing else. No car, no Daniel. Just trees. Just silence. I didn't scream. Couldn't. I folded in on myself like broken paper. He had done it. He left me here. To die. I don't know how long I lay there. But eventually, thirst dragged me up. I remembered a sound. A streamy. I crawled. Splinters ripped into my palms. My lips cracked. My body trembled. Then I fell. Hard. Face against cold earth. And then, a voice of, "Hey, are you alive?" I thought it was a fevered dream. But then came arms, strong, lifting me. A smell, pine, smoke. Sweat, a voice again, "Easy, I've got you." The last thing I saw before blacking out was a man's face. Bearded, rough, eyes like thunderclouds. and behind him, a silent gray dog the size of a bear. That was the moment I stopped dying, and the moment my revenge truly began. He thought I'd die quietly, that I'd vanish like a leaf in the woods. But I didn't, and when I came back, I came for everything. When I opened my eyes again, I was somewhere else. The cabin was different, smaller, warmer. Firelight painted amber shadows across wooden beams. The scent of pine and something herbal clung to the air. Not candle pine, real pine. Damp, earthy, alive. I couldn't move much, my limbs were lead. My throat was sandpaper. But I wasn't shaking anymore, and then I saw him, the man from the forest, bearded. Weathered, he sat by the stove, stirring something in a cast iron pot. His eyes caught mine. Quiet. Watchful. The kind of stare that doesn't look through you, but into you. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low, almost reluctant. "Good. Wasn't sure you'd make it." I tried to speak, but my lips cracked. He crossed the room and gently lifted a tin cup to my mouth. The liquid was bitter, hot, strange, but I drank it. "Shagati," he said, "for the immune system. Tastes awful. Works better." I managed to whisper, "You live here." He nodded once. "Elias?" Then he pointed toward the door, where the giant dog lay curled like a boulder. "Fainer found you." I drifted again, fever dreams, cold flashes. At some point he wiped my face with a damp cloth. At others, I woke to the sound of him reading softly. Old books, field journals, poetry. He didn't ask questions, not yet. But his hands never hesitated. He knew how to check for fever, how to balance broth with herbs, how to move without wasting a step. He wasn't a survivalist. He wasn't a reclusive doomsday prepper. He was a man who'd lived through something and learned to stay. When I could finally speak more than 3 words, I asked him why he lived alone in the woods. He didn't answer at first. Then finally one evening, while adding herbs to tea, he spoke. "Built a lab with someone once. We were close. Best friends since college. Discovered something important. Natural compounds that could help treat autoimmune diseases. Something real. Something big." He paused. Then he patented it under his name. Said I was just an assistant. Accused me of fraud. Burned everything I was. Career. Marriage. Name. He didn't say he came here to die. He didn't have to. I saw it in the way he lit the fire each night, like it was a ritual. Like it was the only warmth he trusted. "I'm Naomi," I said one morning. He didn't react. Just nodded. I was left there, by someone I trusted. This time his hand clenched the rim of the pot, silent rage. But still, no judgment. No pity. That silence, it healed something in me. The days passed with no clocks, no screens, no noise. And I changed. Not back into who I was before. She was gone. But into someone new. Someone slower, more deliberate. Someone who walked barefoot across pine needles and didn't flinch. I told Elias everything. About Daniel, the diagnosis, the isolation, the betrayal, and about the duffel bag. "I think he packed it with exactly enough supplies to last me one night," I said quietly. Elias looked at me, voice flat, calculated, cold. He wanted me to die out there. He didn't reply, but I saw it, the shift. The moment he stopped seeing me as a broken woman and started seeing me as something else. A storm. One evening, while Feener snored softly, I asked, "Do you think people like Daniel ever regret what they do?" "No," Elias said without hesitation. "They only regret getting caught." I nodded, because I knew what I had to do. As I got stronger, I began making lists in Elias's old notebooks, not of herbs or symptoms, but of facts, bank accounts, property deeds, dates. Daniel hadn't just abandoned me. He had erased me, and I was going to write myself back into the story. It started with a phone call. Elias had an old satellite phone buried in a drawer. We used it to contact a lawyer in Missoula, one Elias somehow trusted, a man who owed him favors. Discreet, strategic. Within days, we had confirmation. Daniel had forged a death certificate, transferred all joint accounts, sold my company shares, hosted a memorial service, and posted about it like some grief-stricken saint. And less than a week after my death, Elise, the woman whose perfume I once smelled on Daniel's shirt, had moved into our home. She wore my bathrobe, used my kitchen, slept in my bed. And Daniel, he told everyone I passed peacefully, that I'd urged him to move on. He didn't move on. He cashed in. I wasn't ready to leave the forest yet, but I wasn't staying hidden either. I began planning, building, learning the rhythm of my body again while learning the structure of revenge. "You look different," Elias said one night. "How so?" "Not softer. Not harder either. Sharper." I smiled. "I'm remembering who I am?" He stared at me for a moment. "Good. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "What?" "Don't be gentle. He left me to die in the dark. But now I've found the fire, and I'm bringing it back with me." I left before sunrise, wrapped in Elias's old flannel, a small satchel of medicine at my side, and more courage than I knew I had. Feener followed me to the trailhead, nose in the wind, silent as ever. Elias didn't say goodbye with words. He didn't need to. His eyes said it all. "You'll find me again," I whispered, and he nodded once. "After it's done." Then, just before I climbed into the old pickup truck Bill drove down from the village, Elias said something I didn't expect. "Don't be gentle." I didn't answer. But I didn't need to, because I wouldn't be. Missoula was a blur of steel and glass. The noise was too loud, the air too still. People moved quickly here, but they looked away just as fast. I didn't go home. Daniel had stripped me of everything: phone, wallet, access. I was legally a ghost. So I went to the only person who ever let me fall apart without flinching. Anna, my college roommate, my other sister. The one who knew my real laugh, my sharpest fears. When she opened the door and saw me, gaunt, sun-kissed, wrapped in wool, she froze. Then her eyes flooded. "Naomi." I collapsed into her arms. Over warm soup and trembling hands, I told her everything about the cabin, the lies, the plan. She didn't question it. She only said, "Ma, burn him." Quietly, legally. Forever. Anna had connections. Law school had given her that. And now she was a rising partner at one of the most discreet litigation firms in Minneapolis. Within a week, we had a war room, a forged death certificate pulled from hospital records, transaction histories from the accounts Daniel emptied, a deed transfer on our second property dated days after I'd been reported dead, screenshots of Elise's Instagram posts, her in my robe, drinking from my mug. She'd captioned it, "Healing takes time, but love finds a way." I stared at the post for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because I was fascinated. How easy it was to smile while standing on someone's grave. Our lawyer, Claudia, moved quickly. We filed a lawsuit under a sealed alias, my alias, while petitioning to reverse the death certificate and reclaim legal status. It was complicated, messy, bureaucracy at its worst. But we had time. I had come back from death. A little paperwork wouldn't stop me. Meanwhile, Daniel grieved publicly. He gave interviews, donated to cancer awareness, told everyone about his loss, and behind the scenes, he sold my firm, transferred every remaining asset, moved Elise into a condo downtown. He was celebrating his clean escape. He had no idea I was watching. The subpoena arrived 2 months later. Daniel walked into the courtroom in a tailored navy suit, all fake humility and press, ready sorrow. Elise stood behind him, visibly uncomfortable. When he saw me walk in, his face turned to stone. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I had already died once. I owed him nothing. The trial was brutal, but precise. My testimony came last. I told everything. Every breath of betrayal. Every hollow smile. Every scraped knuckle from crawling on cabin floors. When I described waking up alone, starving, shaking, and realizing he had taken my meds with him, the courtroom held its breath. Daniel didn't blink, but I watched his jaw twitch. And when the prosecutor asked, "Why do you think your husband left you there, Mrs. Fletcher?" I turned to Daniel and said, clear and cold, "Because dead women can't press charges." He was convicted of fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, attempted second-degree murder, sentenced to 8 years in prison. Elise took a plea deal in exchange for cooperation. Suspended sentence, community service, public humiliation. She never looked at me again. only at Daniel, with disgust, when the bailiff cuffed him. Daniel turned his head and hissed, "You should have died out there." I stepped closer, just enough so only he could hear me. I did. And now, you get to live with what came back. That night, Anna and I sat on her tiny balcony under fairy lights. She poured wine. I sipped ginger tea. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No, I survived it. That's different." And in the silence that followed, I realized I wasn't done yet. He thought prison was the end of the story, but it was only the beginning of mine. The money cleared 3 days after the verdict. Every cent Daniel stole, every asset he tried to liquidate, every share of my company I never got to say goodbye to. And I didn't hesitate. I bought a cabin, not a mansion, not a modern lake house, just a small, whitewashed shelter tucked into the edge of a conservation forest near Bozeman, where trees still outnumbered people, where no one cared what you used to be, only what you chose to become now. I didn't decorate much, just warm wood floors, a hand-woven rug, and one painting I had commissioned from a local artist. It was from memory, burned into me like a scar, a stream half frozen in twilight, a man kneeling beside a giant dog, a soft glow from the window behind them. I hung it across from my bed so that sunrise would touch it first. I called the cabin the Thicket. It wasn't just for me. It was a beginning, a seed. I sent a letter, no phone, no email, just ink and paper. A message written in the way Elias would understand, slow, simple, real. The Thicket is real. There's tea on the stove, and a place for your books. I didn't expect a reply. But one quiet morning in April, 5 months after the trial, I drove back to the woods that once buried me. I took the same winding road, the same narrow path that once choked with silence. Only this time, I wasn't afraid of it. When the trees finally parted and the clearing came into view, I stopped breathing. Smoke, curling from the chimney, wood stacked neatly, footprints near the porch, and then a flash of gray fur. "Fanner," I whispered. He barreled toward me like a wolf of joy and thunder, barking, whining, pressing his massive weight against my legs. I sank into his fur and whispered over and over, "I missed you, too." Then I saw him, Elias, standing on the porch, still as a stone, thinner, beard longer, eyes storm-colored and unreadable. I stepped forward. "I came back," I said. He didn't move. "I said I would." A long pause. Then, finally, he stepped down. One step, then another. He stopped just in front of me. I could feel the heat of his body, the scent of cedar and smoke still clinging to his flannel. His voice cracked the silence. "You're here." I nodded. "And I'm not leaving. Unless you tell me to." He didn't. He touched my hand instead. Rough, warm, steady. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was enough. That night we sat by the fire, Feener curled between us like a guardian. I told Elias everything. About the trial, the verdict, the painting, the cabin. And then I said the thing I'd been holding in my chest since I first dreamed it. I want to build something here. With you. A sanctuary. A healing center. Quiet. Real. Elias didn't speak right away. Then he said quietly, "You really think people would trust someone like me again?" I turned toward him. "They won't have a choice. Once they see what you've done for me." His eyes didn't sparkle. He wasn't the kind of man who sparkled, but something in him melted just enough to let in a crack of light. "I kept the journals," he whispered. "I've started writing again." That was the first day the Thicket was born, not just as a place, as a purpose. The woman who came out of the forest was not here to be pitied. She was here to rewrite what healing looked like, one patient at a time. The woman arrived in late May. She didn't knock. She just stood outside the gate, staring up at the weathered sign that read "The Thicket in Hand, Carved Cedar." Her shoulders curled inward. One hand clutched a file of medical reports. The other gripped a bag that looked heavier than her body could carry. I stepped out slowly. Feener padded beside me, silent and low to the ground. The woman's eyes flicked toward the dog. She didn't flinch. "Good. You must be Clara." I said. Her lips trembled. Not from fear. from holding in the last thing she had, pride. Clara was 42. Diagnosed with late-stage lupus. The doctors had done what they always do when they run out of ideas. Referred her to pain management and told her to get her affairs in order. But someone had whispered about us. Not a clinic. Not a miracle. Just a place in the woods where people stopped pretending they weren't afraid. We gave Clara the back room. It smelled of sage and pine and warmth. The mattress was firm. The windows cracked slightly open to let in the forest sounds. The only rule, no pretending. On her second night, she cried for almost an hour. Not from pain, but from permission. No one interrupted her. Elias prepared the regimen, no pills, no prescriptions, just roots, teas, slow meals, warm stillness. I cook soups. The same ones my grandmother used to write in the margins of old cookbooks with notes like, add turmeric when your hands tremble. Use ginger when silence becomes too loud. Clara didn't ask when she would be better. She asked if she could stay through the summer. We said yes. By the third week, she stopped checking her reflection for signs of dying. She started writing again, small poems scrawled in the corners of napkins and notebooks. One morning, I found this folded on the windowsill. I came here to stop existing. But the trees remembered my name. I didn't cry. I made tea. We never advertised. No signs. No website. The word spread in murmurs. Nurses in hospices. Therapists tired of the system. People who had run out of options but not out of hope. They arrived quietly. They stayed longer than expected. And they left lighter. Sometimes not stronger, but always changed. Elias didn't speak to them much at first. He watched. He listened. He moved like a shadow through the garden, tending to plants like they were friends he'd lost and found again. But one day, Clara walked up to him while he was slicing dried bark into a jar. She asked, "What does this do?" And he looked at her for a long moment, then replied, "It teaches the blood to remember how to be brave." From that day on, he taught again. Quietly, one person at a time, the thicket became a rhythm, mornings with steam rising from cups. Afternoons in the herb garden, nights by the fire, not a hospital, not a retreat. Something old or something honest. One evening, as I walked the perimeter trail, Finner at my side, I paused beneath the cottonwoods and looked up. The stars were sharp, fierce. I used to stare at city lights like they were proof I existed. Now I stared at the dark and felt real. Back inside, Elias sat by the fire, one of his notebooks open on his lap. I sat beside him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we never met?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember. We didn't meet. We survived into each other." And as more people came to the thicket, I realized maybe I hadn't come back just to punish what broke me, but to build something stronger in the ashes. The envelope was cream-colored. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in blue ink, neat, elegant, but trembling slightly. Naomi Fletcher. Anna forwarded it to the thicket. She added a sticky note, "Looks personal. Thought you'd want to see it first." I didn't recognize the handwriting. Not at first. Until I flipped the envelope over and saw the tiny initials tucked into the corner. E.B. Elise Braxton. I sat on the porch, the mountains bleeding gold in the distance, the letter cold in my hands. Feener lay beside me, tail twitching. Elias was inside, chopping ginger root for Clara's tea. The world around me was calm. But the paper buzzed like static. I opened it. "Naomi, if I were you, I wouldn't read this. But if you're still who I think you are, the version of you I watch from a distance, then you'll read it anyway. I'm not writing to apologize. I'm writing to confess." I kept reading. The wind slowed. "When I met Daniel, I didn't know who you were. He said you were sick, that you had let go, that he was grieving, but ready to move forward. He made me feel chosen. Made me believe I was stepping into something sacred, not stolen. By the time I figured out the truth, I was too deep. He showed me the death certificate. He cried when he talked about your last breath, and I believed him. Until one night he laughed. It wasn't grief. It was relief. My hands clenched the paper tighter. I could still hear his voice. Still feel the weight of that laughter in the back of my skull. That's when I realized you hadn't died. He'd buried you alive. And by then, I was wearing your robe, drinking from your mug, sleeping in your bed. I became the ghost he created to cover your disappearance. And I let him. Until the subpoena came. Until you walked into that courtroom. And I saw you. Really saw you, and I've never felt smaller. I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to stop. To toss the letter into the fire. But something deeper, something sharper, kept reading. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need something from you anyway. I think he's going to come after you. Not now, not from inside. But after, when he gets out. And he will get out. He hates you more than he loves freedom. I saw it in his eyes. And I know what I saw because I lived with it. I slept beside it. I felt the breath freeze in my chest. Not from fear. From certainty. Daniel had always needed a target. And now, stripped of wealth and power and lies, he only had one left. I've moved far away, changed my name, trying to start again. But I still see his face in dreams, and I thought maybe you should be warned. Be ready now, me. Be ruthless. Or be buried again, Elise. I folded the letter slowly. The sun dipped behind the ridge, throwing long shadows across the porch. Feener lifted his head, ears alert. Inside, I heard the kettle whistle. I didn't move. Elias appeared in the doorway, towel over his shoulder. He saw my face. Didn't ask. He just stepped beside me and waited. It was Elise, I said quietly. He nodded once. And I held the letter up to the dying light. The last lines etched into my memory. She says he'll come for me. Elias didn't flinch. Then let him. He turned toward the fire. We've already buried worse. He left me in the woods once. Now I wait for him in the trees. But this time, I won't be the one lying in the dirt. I didn't tell Clara. She was just beginning to laugh again. Her hands had stopped trembling when she stirred her tea. Her poems were no longer about dying, but about wind and taste and light. She didn't need to know that the man who left me to rot might someday try to finish the job. But without asking, without explanation, that night I found a journal already open on the table. He had begun preparing. The next morning, I walked the perimeter with Feener. We mapped the trail by memory. Every bend, every stump, every blind corner. But this time, we marked them. Elias built small markers from dried moss and bark. I logged their locations and assigned names. The throat, the spine, the last step. It wasn't paranoia. It was remembering what he forgot. I didn't just survive the forest. I became part of it. Anna called a week later. Her voice was cautious but clipped. Daniel filed for early release under medical grounds. My fingers curled around the receiver. Based on what? Back injury. Stress-related conditions. He's trying to use your trial as evidence of emotional trauma. Says your return destabilized him. I almost laughed. But I didn't. Instead, I said, let him try. Anna paused. You sure if he gets out early? I want him to. I didn't recognize my own voice. Low, steady, dangerous. I want him to walk back into the world thinking he still knows who I am. Elias didn't question it when I asked him to teach me more. Which bark bleeds? Which root numbs? How to make poultices that calm the body and ones that cause it to tremble. How to scent the air with warning. I learned to listen for silence in the trees, not noise. To feel what it meant when the birds flew too quickly or didn't return. Sometimes I dreamed of him, not as the man I married, but as a shape in the trees, moving between shadows, smiling that same smile, the one he used in the car before the cabin, the one that said, try to rest. So I did something strange. I planted a single wildflower seed, directly in the middle of the trail leading to the old path, the one Daniel used to drive me into the woods. I didn't mark it with a stone. I didn't water it. I just whispered to it, grow if you're ready. Because I wasn't just preparing for Daniel's return. I was preparing for mine. Elias and I didn't speak of him often. But every now and then, when the fire burned low, he'd say something simple. Your aim has gotten better, Or, if I ever disappear, check the old ridge first. We understood each other in half sentences. Like soldiers who had fought the same war from different trenches. The forest began to thicken with summer again. Clara left in early June, her eyes brighter, her steps firmer, her poems no longer folded, but shared aloud over tea. She hugged me at the gate and whispered, "You gave me back time I thought I'd lost." I smiled and said, "No, you just stopped giving it away." I went to the trail again that evening. Feener beside me. The wildflower seed had sprouted. Just one green shoot, trembling in the wind. But there, alive. If he comes back, he'll find the trail looks the same. But the woman at the end of it isn't. The email came through Anna's encrypted line. Subject re-status update, DF. Attachment a court transcript, notey he's out. And he's playing a long game. I stared at the screen in silence. Feener paced by the door, restless. Elias was gathering herbs in the garden, humming softly under his breath. I opened the file. Daniel Fletcher had been released early. Medical release, back pain, hypertension, emotional trauma from wrongful accusations. The court granted him a reduced sentence, supervised parole, relocation within state. And worst of all, he was suing me. The claim, defamation, intentional emotional distress, interference with civil reputation and employment opportunities. The documents describe me as a disturbed individual with a vendetta who colluded with high-powered legal counsel to ruin a grieving husband's life. He cited my reappearance as a psychological attack, and worse, he accused me of forging the forgery. Said he had been manipulated, that I staged my own disappearance. It was ludicrous, delusional, but dangerously well packaged. Anna's voice was tight on the phone. He hired a media lawyer this time. He's trying to flip the narrative, paint you as unstable, a cancer patient with paranoia and a god complex. I laughed. He's trying to sue me for surviving. He's trying to wear you down, Naomi. Tie you in court. Drain your money. Force you back into the world where he can control the story again. I walked to the window. The forest shimmered in the wind. The thicket stood behind me, full of life, healing people. He wanted to drag me out, make me visible again, so he could erase me properly. Not this time. That night, I told Elias everything. He sat in silence, eyes fixed on the flickering firelight. When I finished, he said just one thing: "We'll fight differently now. Not with teeth, but with roots." So we built a defense. Quiet, strategic, ruthless. Anna's team countersued for malicious prosecution. We filed a cross motion to seal all court records regarding my health history. We reached out to 3 former patients from the thicket who offered anonymous statements of support. We documented everything, not just what Daniel had done, but who I'd become since. Then, one morning, a delivery came. No name, no note. Just a manila envelope. Inside were photographs. Me, Elias, the thicket. Someone had been watching us. From the ridge, from the trees. From the trail I thought I had claimed. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I went inside and locked the door. Then I pulled the first notebook I ever wrote in after leaving the forest. The one that still had dirt on its cover. The one that began with, "He smiled and said, try to rest." And I wrote, "You watched me once. You left me once. But I am not the one who sleeps anymore." Later that night, Elias stood at the edge of the garden. He was holding something. The broken camera drone he had found snagged in a tree. "He's testing the fence," he said. "He's seeing how close he can get." I took it from him. Then let him come closer. This time, when he walks into the woods, he won't find a dying wife. He'll find something he never understood and can never kill. He wanted war. I gave him silence. But not the kind he was used to. Not the helpless kind. This silence was designed. We didn't respond to the lawsuit publicly. No press release, no denial, no counter-accusation. Just quiet. Let him rage. Let him spin stories. Let him post vague updates about truth coming soon and rebuilding from betrayal. We knew what he needed most wasn't justice. It was attention. So we built a mirror and waited. Clara was the first to offer. She sent me a message from her new apartment in Oregon. If he wants witnesses, I've got a few. Want me to gather them? Within a week, I had 7 statements from former guests, each worded carefully with dates, details, and consistent timelines that directly contradicted Daniel's claims. Then we got lucky. Elise. Yes, Elise. She sent another letter, shorter, colder. He reached out to me. Wanted me to clarify things. I recorded the call. Let me know if you want it. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for closure. I gave her both. The call was everything. Daniel admitting he left me. Admitting the forged documents. Admitting the media spin. And most importantly, admitting the drone surveillance. His exact words, she lives in the woods now. Thinks she's some kind of witch, Dr. Queen. I've got eyes on her. Always. If I push the right legal buttons, she'll crack. Anna's team moved fast. We filed for an emergency injunction. We subpoenaed phone records. We submitted Elise's recording, sealed, verified, time-stamped. It wasn't just a defense anymore, it was a trap. The hearing was scheduled. Small courtroom. No press allowed. Just attorneys, a judge, and 2 people who once wore rings with hollow promises. When Daniel walked in, he looked thinner. Hair slicked back, suit too tight. But his eyes, still smug, still sure. Until Elise walked in and sat beside our attorney. He blinked once, then twice, then tried to smile. It twitched, he knew. When they played the audio, the courtroom was still. No gasps, no drama, just his voice, dripping with control, laced with manipulation. And then the silence after his final line. If I push the right legal buttons, she'll crack. The judge leaned forward. Did you say this? Daniel swallowed. That was taken out of context. The judge raised an eyebrow. So you admit that you said it? Our attorney stood. Your Honor, we moved to dismiss the plaintiff's suit with prejudice and pursue damages for harassment, perjury, and unlawful surveillance. Daniel didn't speak again. Not that day. The judge ruled in our favor. He threw out the case, blocked Daniel from further contact, and referred the drone evidence to federal review. And just like that, Daniel didn't just lose again. He lost credibility. But that wasn't the real victory. No. That came 3 nights later, when I received a message from someone anonymous. A man who had once worked under Daniel at a firm I helped build. It was one sentence. We're ready to talk when you are. He thought truth could be silenced, but truth has roots, and mine have begun to grow under his foundation. When you survive silence, you learn that the loudest weapon in the world is the truth told at the right time. The man who reached out was named Jordan. I remembered him. Barely, he was quiet. Junior associate at our translation firm years ago. Always a shadow in Daniel's office, never speaking unless spoken to. Now he was older, sharper. Ready. He sent me an email with the subject line. Everything you weren't supposed to know. Inside the encrypted folder were documents. Internal emails between Daniel and board members, voice memos sent at 3 a.m., hidden accounts, bribes to media, contacts, payoffs to HR staff who ignored harassment complaints of all. A full campaign to erase my legacy from the firm I built with my bare hands. They didn't just want to push me out. They wanted to erase the memory that I ever existed. It wasn't about jealousy. It was about control. Daniel couldn't handle loving someone he couldn't outshine. And when I got sick, he saw his chance. So I gave him what he never expected, a microphone. I gathered every woman Daniel had ever silenced, every staff member gaslit, every whistleblower paid off. We didn't scream, we recorded. Then we released it, not to the media, to the industry, a private webinar, invitations only, hosted by former executives, attorneys, and one former CEO thought to be dead. We called it Reclaiming the Narrative. What happens when you're buried alive in business? It wasn't about him by name, but every slide, every receipt, every redacted email pointed like a blade to the truth. The final image, a scanned copy of the forged death certificate, labeled, "This is what erasure looks like when it wears a suit." The fallout wasn't loud. It was efficient. His consulting offers dried up. His name was quietly dropped from boards. His LinkedIn went dark. The firm he once ran, the one that stole my name from the letterhead, was acquired by a competitor within weeks. No tribute, no severance, just gone. And I went for a walk, past the edge of the thicket, down to the river where I once collapsed. I stood barefoot in the cold stream and let it rush over my skin like time washing away old bone. Elias found me an hour later, soaked but smiling. Was it enough? He asked. I shook my head. No, it wasn't about enough. It was about right. He didn't speak, just held out his hand and walked me home. He lit the match, but I built the fire. And now I burn only what needs to be rebuilt. I used to think names were anchors, something that held you down or held you together. But after all that had happened, after dying, returning, being erased and rewritten, I realized a name isn't what they call you. It's what you carry forward. The thicket had grown, not in size, but in voice. People came now with stories of their own, stories that sounded familiar. I was silenced. I was abandoned. I was told I was the problem, and they asked me, sometimes with trembling lips, "What do I do now?" And I would tell them the truth. You start again. But this time you bring the fire with you. Elias and I never labeled ourselves. We weren't doctors, we weren't therapists, we weren't saviors, we were witnesses. To survival, to change. And we made room for those who still needed to speak without being doubted. One afternoon, as the leaves began to curl toward autumn again, I received a letter. Not handwritten, typed, professional, an invitation. Naomi Fletcher, we are hosting a closed session panel on the future of ethical leadership and accountability in crisis. Your experience is invaluable. Would you consider joining us? I read it 3 times, not because I was unsure, but because part of me still expected to be erased again. Elias stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. When I turned to him, he was already nodding. Say yes, he said, even if your voice shakes. So I did, not for revenge, not for attention, but because silence is only sacred when it is chosen. And I had things to say now, not just about Daniel, but about what happens when women rise from the ground men buried them in, and bring others with them. At the panel, I wore black, not for mourning, but for memory, a reminder that I had once been written off. And yet, here I stood, alive, unbroken, unclaimed. I told my story like a map, not of trauma, but of return. I watched the audience closely, not for applause, but for recognition, and I saw it, in their posture, their stillness, their eyes. People saw me, not as a woman who had been destroyed, but as someone who had chosen not to disappear. When I finished, I said one final thing. I am not a survivor of Daniel Fletcher. I am the architect of Naomi Fletcher, and the room went quiet. Then, one by one, people began to stand, not to cheer, but to witness. Some names are built to dominate. Mine was built to outlast. Fainter died on a cold morning. No violence, no sound, just a quiet breath, drawn deep and then gone. He'd been moving slower, staying closer to the fire, spending longer hours with his head resting on Elias's boots or my knees. But still, I wasn't ready. We buried him near the bend in the trail. The one Daniel never made it past, the one where I nearly gave up. Elias carved a stone with nothing but one word, std. Because that's what Finner did. He stayed. When I couldn't speak, when I couldn't stand, when the world thought I had ended, he stayed. Grief came not like a storm, but like a soft flood. The silence in the mornings, the empty doorway, the way my hands still reached for him at dusk. But instead of breaking me, it rooted me. That winter, the thicket slowed, snow blanketed the trails. Guests trickled in, but the forest asked for stillness, and we listened. Elias taught me how to track snowfall by the angle of trees. I taught him how to read the subtle fear in someone's voice, even when they smiled. We kept each other honest. One night, as the fire cracked low, I sat on the floor with my old notebooks. The first page was torn at the edges. He smiled and said, "Try to rest." I stared at the words, then turned to the last page, blank. And I wrote of, rest wasn't what saved me. Staying did. And fighting like hell to deserve the second chance I was never given. See, Elias and I never married. We never needed to. Love, in its oldest form, doesn't ask for witness or contract. It asks only to be chosen again, every day, in the stillness, in the storms. The thicket is quiet these days, but not empty. Sometimes I hear someone humming near the garden, a guest who once couldn't speak above a whisper. Sometimes I catch the scent of pine and smoke in memory, like a ghost wrapping me in wool. And sometimes when I walk past Fenner's stone, I swear I still hear soft footsteps beside me. Not chasing, not guarding, just staying. So when people ask me now, how did you survive him? I say, I didn't. And I let the silence settle before finishing. I buried who he broke, and I grew something better in her place. And if you ever find yourself abandoned in the woods by someone who swore they loved you, listen closely. Because somewhere under the weight of that silence there is a sound, a pause step, a breath, a life waiting to begin again. You're not alone. You're just not done yet. Some stories are loud, filled with shouting, confrontation, fists on the table. But Naomi's story wasn't that. It was about what happens after the worst, when the noise fades, when the crowd leaves, when you're left with nothing but your breath and a choice. Here's what this story teaches us: a revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's roots. Naomi didn't destroy Daniel with anger. She did it with patience, silence, and truth. Like water breaking down stone, you are allowed to begin again, even if the world writes your obituary, even if the people who should have loved you try to bury you. You can still grow back, differently, stronger, wiser. Not everyone who leaves you is your end, but those who stay, even when you're broken, are your beginning. So if you've ever felt like Naomi, erased, abandoned, doubted, this is for you. You are not weak. You are unfinished. And unfinished people, they still have pages to write, lives to live, names to reclaim. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, courage, even the sting of memory, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video to help it reach others who might need it. Share it with someone who thinks they're out of options. And if you've been through something like this, or are still walking through your own silence, drop a comment. Let someone else know they're not alone. And don't forget to subscribe to Telling Story with me. We share real stories every week that remind us you're not alone, you're not broken, and you're never too far gone to begin again.